Doug Howell.
So the theme tonight is love and war. My story is war and love. Picture this, it's 9:30 p.m., June 25th, 2007. It's a Monday night, I'm at home with my wife, we're getting ready for bed, and the phone rings. I answer the phone, and the voice on the other end says, "Hey Doc, it's John Olson." I go, "Holy crap, John Olson." I hadn't heard from him in 39 years, since we got out of the Marine Corps together in 1968. He said, "I'm getting a bunch of guys together to go back to Vietnam and place a memorial on Hill 362. Do you want to join us?" Hill 362 is a memory, a place that I have been running away from for every bit of those 39 years. You see, in 1966, John and I were members of an elite Marine Corps unit known as the Special Landing Force. We had had extensive training in both amphibious and vertical assault techniques, that is by sea and by air, as well as a variety of ambush and search and destroy tactics and some extensive jungle survival training. In our first months in Vietnam, we were very successful in that we killed or captured a great deal of our enemy. That's war. On July 22nd, we made a helicopter assault deep into the jungle mountains near the border of Laos. We had been told that there was a large concentration of North Vietnamese regular army there. It was our job to flush them out. This was known as Operation Hastings. 13 of our men were killed or wounded as we made our way through the foothills. But on the morning of July 24th, 1966, as we crested a ridge, we found ourselves trapped in an ambush by a regiment of that North Vietnamese army. Of the nearly 200 Marines that climbed over the top of that hill that morning, only 63 of us walked down 48 hours later. We had brought our dead and wounded Marines with us up to a hilltop, Hill 362, and piled them on top of the hill and made a thin perimeter around them the best we could. Most of us on that perimeter were already wounded, but still able to fight. The North Vietnamese regiment, there was somewhere between 300 and 400 of them, surrounded us, trained their mortars on the hill, and just pummeled us. Now, we had been in the jungle for a long time at that point. Our clothes were ripped and torn, falling off us. We had no food. We had very little water, and we were dangerously low on ammunition. We had been hoping for resupply for several days, but it never came. There was no escape route, and we could not dig our fighting holes deep enough. Not a man on top of that hill thought we would see the next morning. Through grit and determination and unbelievable leadership from our officers, we were able to repel their advances, and we extricated ourselves from that hilltop fight. For the 96 hours that we were on that part of Operation Hastings, the Men of India Company were awarded 118 Purple Hearts, 4 Bronze Stars, 3 Silver Stars, a Navy Cross, and a Congressional Medal of Honor. The ensuing 40 years was very difficult for me, particularly the first 10 years after I came home from Vietnam with my involvement with very bad drugs. I was living on the streets, I was panhandling, stealing food from grocery stores. I was headed for a very bad ending. And I was definitely running away from that hilltop. I was running away from the explosions, the mortars, the grenades, the deaths, the dismembered bodies, the images in my brain that will never go away. I was running away from the chaos and screaming I heard every night when I closed my eyes, and I was definitely running away from the image in my mirror that always looked back at me and said, "You were a coward." All of my life, I felt like a coward. This is the very first time I've ever said that publicly. You see, there's a strange and sometimes tragic phenomenon that occurs with people who have survived the fiercest kind of fighting or situation. Some of you may know what I'm talking about, called survivor's guilt. Why did I survive when so many of my friends died, when my best friend was killed? Well, it must be that because I was not brave enough. I was not strong enough. It has been a very heavy burden to bear. Eventually, I realized I needed to get on with my life. My first attempt at schooling was very difficult, but I managed finally to obtain a professional degree. Likewise, my interpersonal relationships were pretty rough in the beginning. My first 2 marriages didn't work out, but from them I was lucky enough to get 2 of the greatest sons a man could ever ask for. In 1993, my company asked me to come to Detroit for a job. My first apartment was on Selden, between 2nd and 3rd, right off the campus. Oh yeah. And I wasn't in Detroit a month. And I said, I'm home. I'm home. Detroit fit me like a glove. And it was serendipity, because it's in Detroit that I met the most important woman in my life, my 3rd wife, Colette, who, and she deserves every minute of that, who probably unbeknownst to her helped guide me on the road to becoming a better man. Yes. So when I hung up that phone that night in June of 2007, I told her what he wanted. I was in a state of shock. Didn't take her 2 seconds. You know you have to go. So in May of 2008, 10 men from India Company went back to Vietnam to climb those jungle mountains of their nightmares and climb up Hill 362 one more time and place a memorial for our fallen brothers. Now, 40 years didn't magically make us any younger or stronger or make those jungle mountains any easier to climb. It certainly did not change the heat and humidity of Vietnam. As we made our way through those mountains on that day, a number of our guys succumbed to the heat and physical stress of 110-degree temperature and 60% humidity. It could not continue. We had made it 8 miles into the mountains, and we were only about 3 miles from where we thought the base of our hill was. We were so close. Some of us wanted to push on. I was particularly angry. I was on the mountain of my nightmares. I had mentally prepared myself to go up on the top of that hill and bury my ghosts. I did not want this moment snatched away from me. It was the most powerful feeling I had ever had in my entire life. It was pulling me like a magnet. Someone said, unit loyalty, you can't buy it. And I realized the unit, the company, those 9 other men were much more important than my singular quest at that moment. We made it down off that hill that day, but just barely. 2 of our guys nearly died, and I'm so very thankful and glad that we came down together as a unit. That's love. But the job was not done, and we all knew it. So the very next year, I went back. This time I went back with only 1 other person. There were 2 of us, Major Michael Carey. Now, Mike Carey was a lieutenant and a platoon leader in an India Company back in 1966. He was with us on that hilltop fight, and he was with us the previous year, in 2008, when we made our attempt. Mike probably is the meanest, toughest, saltiest warrior I've ever met in my life. And while it may seem ironic to you, it's very consistent to me that when he retired from the Marine Corps, he became an Episcopal priest. And that's the truth. But we hired 2 local guides, and we knew exactly where our hill was, and we thought we found a very easy access route to that hill. And on our first day climbing that hill, Major Carey was injured, and he could not continue the second day. But on that second day, I climbed to the top of Hill 362, and I planted our memorial. As I began to realize I was going to complete this quest that had taken so many years, so much time in planning, so much blood, sweat, and tears, literally, not to mention money, I became very anxious. I started feeling scared and alone and completely inadequate for the job. I wished so much that Mike and the other 9 guys could be with me at that moment. Even though I had a short speech prepared and one of the guides was videotaping the event, I was shaking so hard I couldn't speak. You see, I wasn't planning that memorial just for the Marines of India Company that died that day. I was planning the memorials for all of the Vietnamese that we killed, and there was a lot of them. I was planting that memorial for the tragedy of war. And finally, I was burying that demon that had lived in my heart. For so many years. That fall, Major Carey and I presented our pictures and our findings to a reunion of the entire battalion in Washington, D.C. And I gave each of the survivors from India Company a vial of dirt that I stole from that hilltop that day. And I realized something really important. And that is that all those years, I wasn't alone in my feeling. That each of those guys, to one degree or another, felt or wished or hoped or thought that they could have done something more to help prevent deaths on that hilltop. And as we put our arms around each other and laughed and cried together and expressed our love for each other, I understood right then that we would be forever, to the last breath of the last man, forever bonded by war and love. And I also realized one other thing, and that was that the job was not yet done. So this May 2013, the original 10 guys are going back to Vietnam for the final time. Mike and I are going to show them the path that we found in the hilltop, one that I know they can all make, and one that I hope will allow them to bury some ghosts of their own. I've been able to recover some of my dignity from those missions in 2008, 2009, please excuse me, and from the subsequent many Marine Corps reunions, and I realized that it really is about love. About the love of my Marine Corps brothers, both past and present, dead and alive. About the love of my wife, my children, my family, about the love of my incredible friends. I probably wouldn't be here. There is only one thing that can survive love. Survive war. There's only one thing that can defeat war, and that's love. I want to thank you very much for letting me share my story with you tonight.